didn't look good, but it was good.
All right, y'all push.
Bill, you want to come here? I'll be there.
No, I'm good.
Where's my purple pen? There it is. I found it. I found it. I got 3 purples. That's right.
Is this thing on?
Nope.
Let me make sure. Are you recording? Yep. All right, ladies and gentlemen. We have officially ended with the book of James. And next week, you'll be getting this binder. But if you got it this week, only 5 others could get it. Only 5 of the, I think we ordered 50 came in. So if you'll leave those here, this packet here, or take it with you, whichever one you want to do. I'm going to give you these next week and you can slide them right in there. No one's going to steal it in here. You may have to write your name on it, but here we go. So Miss Amy suggested last week that we study the book of Galatians. Now, excuse me if I have to keep my throat a little moist and a little warm. Is pollen starting already? Is that one of those things? Apparently, I'm allergic to Arkansas. So, just is what it is, guys.
Everybody that lives in Arkansas.
That ought to tell you something.
As long as it's not.
The books of Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, and Colossians are known as the prison epistles. These were written to churches while Paul was prison. Imagine that. That's why they're called the prison epistles. You can also remember them if you get them out of line like this. Go eat popcorn. Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, and Colossians. That's how I remember them. So you just do what you want to do. If you didn't get one, they're still up here. You're more than welcome to have them. The author are the human penman, not the author. Well, let's start there. Who's the author? God is. The Holy Spirit is. That's right. Whose pen did he use to write it? How do you know that? Chapter 1, verse 1, right? Is there any other place in Galatians that would say that? Chapter 5, verse number 2. The only 2 places in that particular book where Paul pushes forth his penmanship of that particular book. Paul wrote a pile of books into 27 books we call the New Testament. He wrote either 13 or 14, depending on how you want to look at it. If you want to believe he wrote Hebrews, go ahead. That's fine. I don't think he did, but if you think he did, that's fine. It don't matter. Who ultimately wrote Hebrews, by the way? God did, so it didn't matter what pen he used. So he wrote a lion's share of the New Testament. There were 8 pens used to write the New Testament. Who owned those pens? Matthew,
Mark, Luke, John, Peter, Paul, James, Jude.
That's all the writers. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Peter, Paul, James, Jude. If you need to know that one, it comes in a little chant for under first grade little children. We heard that 1,000,000 times riding from Nesbitt, Mississippi to Memphis, Tennessee on Sundays and Wednesday nights while I was going to school. Who wrote the Bible? Who wrote the New Testament? Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, Peter, Paul, James, and Jude. That's exactly how that lady sounded. And you think, I am never going to forget that. He's one of the 8 pens that was used to write the New Testament. Take a look at Galatia itself. 277 BC, a group of folks moved from Europe called the Gauls, Gauls, and they move into a place and they settle it, and it's called Galatia. It wasn't until 25 BC where Galatia is picked up by the Empire of Rome, and it becomes a Roman province. Geographically, Galatia sits in the northern portion of Asia Minor, which is where today?
Turkey.
Right? Who knew that? Well, there we go. It's the northern part of Turkey. Politically speaking, with Rome, the borders of Galatia change. Just every now and again, they'll move it a little bit this way or move it a little bit that way. So cities like Derbe and Lystra and Iconium, sometimes are in Galatia's province, sometimes they're not. So it just sort of fluctuates a little bit by what the emperor wants to do. Now, it needs to be said straight out that the Galatians, the church to which the book of Galatians is written, is not the only church in that province. Somebody read 1 Corinthians 16:1.
Now concerning the collection for the saints,
Be careful right here. Keep going.
as I have given order to the churches,
You hear that? Hear that? As I have given order to the who?
churches
Churches of
Galatia.
Galatia. That's more than one, right? This is a trick. Is there more than one church in Galatia?
Yes and no.
No, there is not. There is one church worldwide. There are two congregations. There are two congregations, but there are not two churches. There are two gatherings of people, multiple congregations in one place. By the way, does that tell you anything about Galatia?
A lot of Christians. More than one congregation.
More than one congregation, a lot of Christians. A lot of Christians is subjective.
For the time.
I do not know, not at the time. Galatia's going to be a big place, but I think you might be overlooking the obvious. How many people started there at the Church of Galatia? There were 6 of them in Acts 19. Now we've grown to 2 congregations. What does that tell you? Somebody did something. Key number 1 in the book of James. Do something. Somebody told a neighbor somewhere about the truth. Somebody taught someone else. Paul was inspired to write this book somewhere around 53 to 57-ish AD. Though all those dates that I'm giving you about the writing and not the history are going to be ish dates. Because we don't know that he wrote it on September 29th of 55 AD. We don't know that. We just know that he wrote it somewhere in those 4 years. But as old as I am, and as long as I've been living on this earth, here's what I know. Paul wrote this way before, Paul, by the inspiration of God, wrote this way before I was born, so it really don't matter. At this point, it's still valid for me. Here is the debate outline of this particular book, chapters 1 and 2. It is required that Paul defend his apostleship. He's going to have to prove, unfortunately, to a group of people he's been to at least twice, that he is who he said he was. And that he's from God just like he said he was. Chapters 3 and 4 in the debate format, liberty. Chapter 5 and 6, limits. There is is a big, giant disclaimer right at the bottom of your page, and you need to be able to make sure you understand this. And this is the key to the book. Liberty and responsibility go hand in hand. Christian liberty does not grant us permission to run wild with no restraints. Just doesn't do it. Doesn't do it. Galatians is going to be a debate between Paul and Judaizing teachers. Don't turn off your front page. You got some more stuff to write. Between Paul and Judaizing teachers. We touched a little bit in James about what a Judaizing teacher was. Does anybody remember what that was? All right, that's fine. A person who has, in theory, obeyed the gospel, or at least knows what the gospel is, and wants to tag on the back of it some portion of the old law. Now, I'm going to give you what the three big ones are. The number one, biggest one they're going to tag on the back of New Testament Christianity is circumcision. That's a big thing. That was the sign of the covenant for so many years. And when these Judaizing teachers hear that this is the new covenant, they think circumcision. If that were the case, just follow this road for a moment. Would the people who were circumcised underneath the old law need to be circumcised again underneath the new law? If that's the case, well, I don't know everything I know about anatomy, but
It's hard to do. It's not there.
yeah, it doesn't exist anymore.
But what about the women?
Oh, what are you talking about?
Don't go.
Whoa, easy.
I mean, even under the old law.
Even in the old law, they were not circumcised. But so when you go to the temple, let's take ourselves back to the old law. You go to the temple, there is a priestly job, one from the tribe of Levi, whose job it is to make sure that the people who come into the temple are Jewish. The women and the Gentiles stay out in the outer court, so they don't count. I say that historically, not from my perspective in 2024. Sure, guys, that's right. So they stay outside there, so they're not, the Gentile and the lady are not being checked for circumcision. The men who come in have to prove they're circumcised. There are two ways you can do that. You can bring the letters from the rabbi. I think now they have a bris and the memorial does it, and you can bring those letters, and they're stamped like a notary public kind of thing, and you can show them the letters, and you can walk on through. If not, he's going to have to visually see your covenant. I can only assume that's the worst job in the priesthood. That's the number one argument they're going to have, the Judaizing teacher will have. Whenever you read about them in the Bible, that's going to be their number one argument. Their number two argument is holy days. Yes, you can have all the New Testament you want, but what about Passover? We have all the New Testament you want, yeah, but what about Pentecost? You have all the New Testament you want, yeah, but what about the Feast of the Tabernacles, or the Feast of Wheat, or the Feast of this? Or what's your favorite? How many of you like Thanksgiving more than Christmas? How many of you like Christmas more than Thanksgiving? Hey, whatever your favorite holiday is, who cares? It doesn't matter, does it? On that idea. Here they're saying, this is my favorite holiday, I'm going to attach it, but historically speaking, it has some value, doesn't it? Passover has a value, And we say, no, not in the New Testament. It still has a value. We still study about it, don't we? It still has a value. The Feast of Tabernacles, it still has a value. Now, is it salvation? No, but it doesn't have a value, sure. And they're so caught up in their favorite holiday that they want to attach it to the back of salvation. That's number 2. The Judaizing teacher will attach to the back of New Testament Christianity circumcision. He'll attach their holidays, and he'll attach diet. Acts chapter 10. Acts chapter 10, the very first portion of it, holds a great awakening for Peter, and he doesn't even realize it. 3 times as he goes into this trance, a sheet is let down. All sorts of pulled pork and bacon sandwiches and fried catfish and all kind of stuff is on there. And he says, he looks at God in his face and he says, I'm a Jew, I don't eat anything that's unclean. Is that statement true? I would say probably till then, Peter, even being a New Testament Christian, for however long a time 8 chapters is, I'm going to assume that he probably still lived under those dietary restrictions he's always lived under. That's just what he knew. Is it okay to not eat pork?
Depends on why you do.
No. Hey, have you ever had bacon? It's real good. It's okay. It's absolutely okay not to eat it. What if you just say, well, I don't like bacon? Well, that means you're not from this world. And something's completely odd. But could you say, I'm just not going to eat it? Sure. You say, well, I'm just not going to eat ice cream. I don't know why you'd do that. Well, I'm going to quit drinking Coke. Well, I don't even think you can go to heaven now. There's no set of dietary rules for the Christian. And then again, there's no set of rules that are against dietary rules for the Christian. If you don't want to eat it, don't. If you do, knock it out. Now, I'm going to tell you this one thing. You can believe it or not. When we first moved to Gadsden, that would have been 13 years ago now, we had a fellowship meal, and some lady made chocolate-covered bacon. Now, don't make that face, because I'm going to tell you what. It's fine. I ate the fire out of that, and I thought, well, I hope she makes it next time, too. She never made it again. There are no dietary restrictions for the member of the church, aside from eating blood. That's been a restriction. You can't eat blood. You can't eat humans. You can't eat blood. That's been a restriction since. So circumcision is thrown on the back of the New Testament. Holidays are thrown on the back of the New Testament. Diet is thrown on the back of the New Testament. By the way, back to Acts chapter 10. When those sheets came down and Peter looked at them, what was the lesson God was teaching him, or trying to teach, that he ultimately would learn the next chapter? What's the lesson he's trying to be taught?
I think that Jews can accept anyone,
Everybody's clean.
everybody.
As long as God says they're clean, if they go through it God's way, they're clean.
God made it, it's okay.
Black people, white people, whoever, males, females, whoever, if it's done God's way, it's clean. The end. Well, they look different from me. Well, good. I'm glad people look different from me. All right.
It was difficult for them to,
I'm sure it was. Surely it was.
when they were used to doing that for generations.
Mm-hmm. We ought to know, we in the South ought to know that very well. Oh, now it got real bad. Y'all know about black people and white people down here, do you? Mm-hmm. I worked for a congregation who paid for a building for a black congregation so that they didn't worship with us. Mm-hmm. Welcome to Alabama. Is that right? No.
But, you know,
No, there is no but on that.
but a lot of black people don't want to worship with white people. It's not just white people.
Well,
We have invited.
here's what I'm going to say to you. Both sides of that, I don't want to worship with whoever because of whatever, is wrong.
Who was the preacher, George Walker?
I was, and my friend William Dinsmore was the other preacher. Fantastic guy.
So there's nothing wrong with them still not eating that food. So
No.
where's the issue? When they're binding it?
Yeah, they're gonna say you can't have this diet or you can't eat those things. So the lesson, by the way, the lesson he's trying to be taught is everybody's clean. Yes, ma'am.
Well, it comes down to really, it's a matter of conscience. If it violates your own.
Are you talking about diet?
Yeah.
Yeah, if you want to eat it, if it makes you feel uncomfortable not to eat it, don't do it. You ever had pig's feet?
We have to be cognizant of
I hadn't.
people's feelings that way too, because if somebody has a really strong opinion about something, then we shouldn't expect them to violate their own conscience and expect them to.
Sure. Scruples are interesting. Yes, sir.
So with the Judaizing teachers, how did that work in reference to Gentiles, considering they were surrounded by them?
With the up into Turkey?
Yeah, talk about in churches in Galatia. How did they ever really spread the gospel if they were still holding to the Judaizing system?
Well, the Judaizers are not spreading the gospel. What's happening is the gospel is spreading from the three tours that Paul takes, and then they become like a parasitic tick. They begin to join themselves to those particular congregations and suck the life out of them. They start people bickering and fussing and fighting. Welcome to Romans, or Corinth, or Galatia. Eventually, Ephesus.
Could those have also been some of the people who fled Rome?
Sure, absolutely. They could have been the guys who fled Rome. They could have. I'm going to say this for the Judaizing teachers, and this is just my opinion. Y'all got that? This is just my opinion. You can take it or leave it. When I look at them and see how they're teaching and what they're teaching, I see them wanting to make sure that this new fledgling church have just as much respect for God and His law as the nation of Israel had, or at least pretended to have. Did they go about it the wrong way? Yeah. Should they have done other things or not even done that? Yes, but if you read in Romans chapter 10, Paul writes there, "Brethren, my desire and prayer for Israel is that they might be saved, and that I record that they have a zeal toward God, but not according to knowledge." They have a zeal toward God. They have a want to. Their want to is just wrong.
People, if you study Judaism, and I teach that at school, they're very much a follow their law to the T group of people.
Yeah, they get upset with you if you have a camera on Sabbath. If you have a cell phone.
There's so many differences from the New Testament to the Old Testament as far as their laws were concerned that, it was hard for them to give those up. And so they're just trying to integrate their Old Testament into the New Testament.
Sure.
Because they didn't understand.
And their problem is going to be chapters 3 and 4 where liberty is mentioned. And they're going to go, we never have had this. I don't know. Are we supposed to?
You can look at the new churches in India. They still cling to some of the traditions, like the men on one side.
Mm-hmm. And you know what? They'll have to. That congregation will have to grow out of that, and that's not a wrong thing. but it's just an old tradition thing.
Well,
That,
it's okay if they stay with it. I mean, that's not gonna affect your salvation.
are you trying to sit across the way from me? Well, that ain't gonna happen here.
The other side of that, Billy, is so much of the Jewish culture at that time was bound up in their salvation was from the physical acts.
Right,
Yeah.
that's right. Go ahead.
But at what time are we allowing society and social norms to dictate worship in the church?
Yeah,
You go
yeah,
back to the church in India.
that's right.
Our friends have been missionaries over there a long time, talk about the same thing, men and women separated. That's a societal thing,
Mhm.
and we're allowing society to dictate how things operate in the Lord's body.
Well, I don't know if it deals with the operation as much as it deals with the appearance, because
But we're still
Coats-
separating people. What's the
coats and ties are the social norm here.
What's the difference of the white people sit on this side, and the black people have to sit on that side?
Custom. It's
It's,
custom.
Yeah.
That's a great question. I don't know that there is a difference, especially if you look in India. What if this class sat on that side and that class sat on the other side?
Again,
The,
it's a
the,
very,
the, pro-
And then you're looking at 1 Corinthians, the problems there,
the
where
problem with races isn't sitting on one side of the building and the other side of the building. It's the thought that we've already said of not wanting to worship together. When people don't want to worship together, that's a problem. Coming into a building,
'cause everybody knows there's a black heaven and a white heaven.
coming to a building and women sitting on one side, men sitting on the other, races sitting on one side, and races sitting on the other, will not keep you out of heaven. That's not a salvation issue.
Well, we
The
can-
intent of your heart is a salvation.
It can be taken to a point to where it could be, where it could be.
we can't.
But when
can't
we
put
start
it on
out-
that side of the building, and that's
Well-
the problem.
I mean, that's sort of
An issue out here.
that sort of would say, this side doesn't really deal with that side, or that side not with this side. And it's just one of those things where we look at 70 West, and what we need to think is, how can I talk to Miss Irma, who sits over here while I sit over there, and make sure, that she knows I'm here and says hey to me and those kind of, we just make sure we gel together properly. Yes, ma'am.
When you're talking about how they have the zeal, I mean, we're still dealing with this today. There's a lot of religious groups that have a lot of zeal. They're
But-
religious-
And they're just as wrong as you can be. Yeah, sure. Let's look at the two points that Paul will make, and the two words he's going to use over and over and over again. And if you don't understand this from the get-go, you're going to be messed up understanding this debate. The first word is law. The second word is faith. Now let's define law. Now listen, pay attention. We are defining these two words in the context of the book of Galatians. And that's the only way we're defining them. Because if you take it to another book, because he's making a comparison each time. If you take those things to another book, those words, while they're going to mean the same thing, the comparison's not going to be there. First of all, law. Old Testament law given to Moses on Mount Sinai, by which the nation of Israel lived and ran their economy, ran their civil life, and ran their religion. That Old Testament law. By the way, it does include the 10, but it's not limited to those 10. 613 of those laws were there. Faith. The New Testament system of faith by which God saves man. So when he speaks of law, you'll understand that's the Old Testament law. And when he contrasts faith with that, you're going to understand that that's the New Testament system of faith. Does that mean that people under the law didn't have faith? No. Doesn't mean that at all. By faith, Abel. By faith, Abraham. By faith, Moses. By faith, Rahab. By faith, the walls fell down when the nation of Israel. Those were all by faith. But their Their sticking point were those 613 laws of God. They would say that's what makes them different. God, as the theocracy, has given them the right to be the only nation in the world that He prefers. Why did God prefer the Jewish nation?
Because that was the line that.
There you go. It's the only thing they had. This the line through which Jesus is coming. There's got to be blood, so here we go. All right, that looks like Galatians, at least as an introduction. I got a Bible here, don't I? If we can keep those things in mind, we can probably do pretty well with the book of Galatians. My title says, The Epistle of Paul the Apostle to the Galatians. Here's how you can tell Paul wrote it. And here's how because he will do this just about every single time. Paul, an apostle. He's introducing himself here. And he immediately starts with the defense of his apostleship. Paul, an apostle, parentheses, not of men, neither by man, but of Jesus Christ, and of God the Father who raised him from the dead. He's going to start by saying, my name is Paul, my office is apostle, and there is not a person alive on this earth who has ordained me in this office, but rather it was God and Jesus the Christ whom he raised from the dead. Now, in the South, we would add onto that, if you got a problem with that, take it up with them. He's starting right now to build a basis of his apostleship. Remember, these Judaizing teachers have come in and sort of whittled it away to where even people in Galatia now are saying, are we really sure about Paul? Are we really sure about him? This is the guy, Paul, an apostle of Jesus, or apostle not of man or of men, but of Jesus Christ and God the Father. Interestingly, notice this. Who he raised from the dead. Cites a miracle of raising from the dead. He cites the ultimate finality of salvation, being baptized and raised to walk in a newness of life. He cites a lot of things in the phrase being raised from the dead. What an interesting idea. Did Paul do miracles? This is a trick question. Let me finish the question now. Did Paul do miracles in Galatia? I don't know. Probably. I'm going to say probably. Did he have the ability to do those things?
Yeah.
All right, so he's one of 13 men who are apostles, right? Why there were 12, then what happened? Right? Judas killed himself. Then there's 11, then what happens? Matthias comes in, right? That's 12. We're back up to 12. Now, on the road to Damascus, Paul is confronted with Jesus and then is told, I got a job for you to do, but you're going to have to be a member of the church first. And so he becomes a member of the church and straightway goes out and starts preaching the gospel. His job by God is to be an apostle to the Gentiles because the others are looking at the Gentiles like, I ain't going over there. So, when he mentions things like raising those from the dead, it could be that Paul did miracles over there. We're never told yes or no about that. He did have that ability. He was one of the 13 men on the earth who had all 9 of the spiritual gifts, plus, this is what makes him an apostle, plus the ability to give it away. Acts chapter 8. Philip goes over to Samaria, baptizes a bunch of folks, and how many of them had spiritual gifts? None. Until James and John got over there and started laying hands on folks and handing that stuff out. Peter didn't, Philip, whichever P name that is, Philip didn't have the ability to do that because he was not an apostle. Well, when do spiritual gifts stop? When the last guy who had been touched by the last apostle and given some gifts, when he dies, it's done. It wasn't meant to go forever. We're not meant to have it today. Why? Because 1 Corinthians 13, 10 through 13, we got this. When that which is perfect is come, then that which is in part, those miracles will be done away with. What happens in Colossae, at the church there, the folks in Rome may never find out about till way later. Although we can read about it at the same time, right now. Look at verse 2. And all the brethren which are with me unto the churches, once again, of Galatia. He is greeting the church, or the congregations, in Galatia, which would tell me it went to one of them, whoever it was mailed to, and probably something was attached and said, hey, pass this on. Let them read this. Make sure they know about it too. Unto all the brethren. Who's writing to him? Paul is. Is Paul a member of the church? Yeah. Yeah. He was a member of the church when he wrote Galatians, right? So he's writing to other members of the church, so it wouldn't be out of the way for him to call them brethren. He called them brethren and sistren, right? Which are with me.
Is that physically or just those that hold to his beliefs?
What are you talking about? We're with me? Oh, I think it's all those who are around him. He's writing this, and he's at a congregation as he's writing this, and they're around him. They're supporting him. I don't know that everybody came up to him and said, hey, mention me in that letter. Tell him I said, hey, those kinds of things. There's generally a collective. Everybody at 70 West says, hey. All right. Everybody from camp says, hey. All right. One of those kinds of things. This is the first century Roman version of tell him your mama, we said, hey. To everybody, we said, hey. All right, they said, hey. And this is from one congregation of people to another congregation of people. Don't get thrown off by the word churches. Those are individual congregations. Individual congregations. I wish the King James Version would have translated it as congregations of people.
Do other translations translate it such?
That's a great question that I don't know. Let's see.
But it's what the Greek says, right?
The church's main congregation.
Yes, there's only one church, right?
They said there was only two.
Is that right? Let's start right there.
Churches of Christ salute you.
Is there one church or more than one church?
One church.
You're one church. And so when he wrote the churches of Christ salute you, or to the churches in Galatia, he's speaking of congregations at that point. Where are we at here? Do I have a Galatians on there? All right, one.
All right, I got King James, CSB, New King James, NIV, NLT, ESV, RVR, NET, RSV, ASV, YLT. Okay, YLT says.
What is YLT?
Says assemblies.
Assembly?
Y says assemblies.
Assemblies would be okay.
HNV says assemblies. I can't read all the rest of the languages, but everything else says churches.
Didn't you tell us there was only two of them?
Oh, there are at least two of them because of churches, right. So the word here, interestingly, is ecclesia. It's a gathering of citizens of God in a certain place. So you could say gatherings, you could say congregations, you could say churches. That's gatherings of called out ones. I want us to understand that they're not multiple churches, but these are congregations of the same, just like us and Aldridge Road here in the same town.
Is there any way to know whether the churches of Galatia are the same churches of Asia in Revelation?
They are not mentioned as one of the seven.
But Galatia is just a region.
Right,
And
right.
churches that are within this region. So is the churches in Asia and Revelation, the seven churches, is it in the same region of Asia Minor?
It would be around the same area, and I can't say as a definite yes that, because the three most popular in my mind that are popping out are Lystra, Derbe, and Iconium. And I know they're not in those seven churches that are mentioned, but in that region, they're in that same area, sure. And I'm sure those in Galatia are going through those same sort of pressures from Rome. I'm sure they are. Here's his Jewishness popping out. Grace be unto you and peace from God our Father and from the Lord Jesus Christ. That is a very common Jewish phrase. Do y'all ever do this when somebody comes by and honks a horn? They say, tell your mom and them and said, hey? Yeah, your mom and them, yeah. That's the same kind of phrase. It's one of those things you sort of blurt out and you don't even think about. This phrase has been in his life for so long that it's just part of the vernacular. Remember that Paul is a Roman citizen and has all of the rights of a Roman citizen. He has everything afforded to him that any Roman citizen could have. But he's also an educated Jew. He has 4 PhDs in the Jewish world, and he's just as much Jew as he is Roman. And so when those little southern things come out, y'all ever say, that needs carrying off like a dead dog? See, I don't know nothing about that. Finest frog hair split 5 ways? All right, y'all know about that? When those little southern things come out, then you look at somebody and go, that boy right there's from the South. Huh. This grace, peace, and mercy, those kinds of things as a greeting are completely Jewish, and it's a formality. It's kind of a bow, a courteous bow of respect toward them. And it's also mentioned as this, that this grace and this peace is from the Father and from the Christ, which is another thing they have in common that's pulling them back together, that the Judaizing teachers are chiseling away at to kind of separate them from Paul. Well, we'll pick up with verse 3 next week and see if we can't do better with it than we did. Here you go.
I don't know what to do.